What? Poland is preparing for war? I couldn't believe when I read this the first time. So let's see what this is all about. And as always, keep your recommendations in the comments. Let's go.
Once the tragic crossroad of European empires, it has undergone nothing short of a Western military renaissance in the 21st century and is now
Really?
becoming one of the most feared armies in Europe. Yep,
Ooh.
you heard that right. Poland has become a military beast, and Putin really should think twice before deciding to poke this fully staffed, well-armed, and exceptionally trained bear. The ongoing war in Ukraine
Bear, of course, Wojtek, right?
has undeniably influenced Poland's military posture. But with the flurry of spending increases, arms deals, and recruitment programs, what exactly is Poland gearing up for, and will it be prepared? After what Poland's been through in recent history, trying to pull off a modern military revival is no joke. Within the span of a single lifetime, the Polish nation waded through shattering, simultaneous military defeats at the hands of both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, a wartime occupation, partitioning, and tragic Holocaust, and its complete absorption into the Warsaw Pact as a Soviet satellite for the 40 years that followed. Talk about trauma. During the latter Cold War period, Poland's population doubled. It maintained a decently large standing army, often joined by Soviet troops stationed within its territory. The Eastern Bloc country, led by unapologetic communist officials closely aligned with Stalin's regime, nevertheless managed to rebuild its devastated cities in the aftermath of World War II, slowly raising.
I mean, we had a few views into your beautiful cities like Wrocław or Krakow, so you did this rebuilding very well.
Standard of living among its inhabitants. Over time, hardline Stalinists fell from power, followed closely by many ousted Soviet officers who had for decades filled leadership positions throughout the Polish army.
Rokossowski.
The 1970s and 80s ushered in an
Are
era
those officers very famous in Poland?
leadership positions throughout the Polish army. The 1970s and 80s ushered in an era of turbulent protests and
Prowizję.
political change. The rise of Solidarity, a widely popular anti-communist social movement, preceded mass pushback to and the eventual breakdown of Soviet authority in Poland. The Poles
Yeah, with a good right? Because that was a dictatorship, probably.
wanted freedom and eventually took it. By 1991, the dissolution of the Soviet Union created the conditions for democratic elections, Poland's first since 1920. This landmark moment was to be Poland's first major step in its inexorable civil-military transformation, one that would see the nation progressively look westward for models upon which it could base its rapidly developing economic, military, and political systems. Poland's Western integration scared the pants off enemy soldiers, and on September 18, 1993, Soviet troops left the country for good. Just 5 years later, in 1999, Poland officially joined NATO. 5 years after that, it joined the EU.
So early.
1999, Poland officially joined NATO.
I wasn't born there.
5 years after that, it joined the EU. But Poland trying to become besties with
I still know him from somewhere, like in the newsroom a few years ago.
the West is not a new story. Today, many people forget that though Poland was ravaged by the Axis early on in World War II, its armies in exile fled Soviet gulags and went on to fight gallantly as pilots.
By the way, I have heard that like gulags were even worse than concentration camps from like the environment. Is this true?
Sailors and soldiers within the Allied armies abroad. With hundreds of thousands of Poles voluntarily serving in Italy and on the Eastern Front, they fought with hope that they might someday rebuild Poland from the ashes. A new Poland, one free from the tyranny of coercive foreign regimes. Poland followed this North Star as it cast away the vestiges of Soviet control in the new millennium.
I mean, we have to consider one thing, right? Germany, only a small part of Germany was under Soviet regime, or Russian. I mean, Russia was the biggest part of the Soviet Union, but whole Poland was. So, of course, the fear of Russia is much, much more. Please hit like and subscribe. It would help me so much. Thank you.
Since it has progressively sought to become a self-sufficient, independent power in its own right. Even before it joined the EU, Poland sent 2,000 soldiers to participate in the 2003 invasion of Iraq, then the coalition's fourth largest military contribution behind the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia. Poland maintained its presence in Iraq for
Not
years,
bad.
participating in and even leading Multinational Division Central South, a NATO unit responsible for an entire occupation zone as part of Multinational Force Iraq. Their deployment lasted until 2008, when Polish troops were finally withdrawn from the country, but Iraq was just the beginning. In Afghanistan too, Poland signaled its solidarity with the West. There for the duration of the 20-year forever war, the Poles proved themselves reliable, trustworthy partners, cycling through more than 33,000 personnel in what constituted the largest peacekeeping mission in Poland's military history. We're telling you, you want these guys to be on your side, but don't take our word for it. Western veterans of these two wars whose tours of duty brought them into contact, but don't take our word for it.
They don't look like they are joking. Look at those faces. Look at, hey, I will kill you if you do one step the wrong way.
Veterans of these two wars whose tours of duty brought them into contact with their Polish allies almost unanimously praised their martial prowess, professionalism, and battlefield capabilities. Each additional year spent as part of NATO's multinational deployments increased Poland's military effectiveness, interoperability, and trustworthiness. With certain pundits labeling Poland an emergent protégé of the United States in Central and Eastern Europe, the nation has more than demonstrated its unity with other NATO allies, as well as its approval and support of American security policies. Since 1989, each successive Polish government has supported America's forward military presence in Europe, seeing in their ally a source of protection, friendship, and economic prosperity it so desperately lacked throughout its fraught history.
Yeah.
Poland has repeatedly been one of few NATO countries willing to fulfill their obligations to spend 2% of their GDP on defense spending, a point of friction between the US.
I mean, from this whole perspective, this all makes so much more sense, right?
And its other NATO allies in recent years. With amicable relations deteriorating between Poland's current right-wing government and President Joe Biden, who won the presidency in 2020, Russia's invasion of Ukraine caused a resurgence in Polish-American relations. Ever since, the two countries have reaffirmed their commitment to each other and to their shared desire to arm Ukraine with the weapons it needs to succeed. Great, everyone's getting along. Now let's get down to business and talk about...
Is this vision more because you want to keep Russia away, or because you actually care more about Ukraine? That is interesting. And what is like the more motivating factor there?
Geostrategy and tanks. The latest landmark decision to finally...
Because in Germany, it's clearly like helping Ukraine, and less like because we have not so much fear of Russia.
Send main battle tanks to Ukraine.
It growed, but it is not like very solid here.
Has renewed attention on the United States and Germany. In reality, Ukraine owes much of the decision's outcome to Poland, who was one of the first countries to pressure a reticent Berlin into increasing its support for Ukraine by asking for approval to transfer its own German-made Leopard 2 tanks. Talk about heart. Jeopardizing its own diplomatic relationship with its German neighbor, Poland acted as a catalyst for consensus, eventually deciding to send its Leopards to Ukraine even without explicit German consent. Arguably, this choice helped bring Berlin and the rest of the West into agreement on the issue. It also demonstrated
Great job.
Poland's proactive leadership role as a vocal opponent of Russian aggression, warnings it has been issuing to Europe since it joined the European Union in 2004. Today, Poland is the security linchpin on the NATO alliance's eastern flank. Strategically placed on Russia's westernmost border, its rapid economic modernization and expansion of its armed forces has catapulted it into 20th place in the list of the world's most powerful militaries.
Probably before Germany.
During the war in Ukraine, it has accepted more displaced Ukrainian refugees than any other European nation, several million in fact, providing them access to healthcare, education, and employment in the process. Poland also ranks highly in...
Great job. I know it has many people don't like the Ukrainians in Poland, but still, it was a great job of you to let them in.
European military aid to Ukraine.
Especially because you're not one of the most wealthiest countries after all, right, in Europe.
Passing virtually every European nation save their neighbors in the Baltics. To date, they have sent hundreds of tanks, armored vehicles, and small arms to their imperiled neighbor, likewise opening their roadways to an unending stream of international aid flowing into Ukraine in great numbers. What about the rest of the West? Let's just say Europe's old guard have not emerged from the conflict in Ukraine unscathed.
Yeah, like 3 pictures were shown, 2 of them were German.
Great Britain is no longer a part of the European Union. Germany's initial reluctance to distance itself from Russian trade deals, pipelines, and natural resources, and the French president's dogged belief in the possibility of a negotiated settlement with Putin, despite Ukraine's wishes to restore its original borders, have seen each country's prestige fall. Poland has wholeheartedly jumped into this leadership vacuum and is now attempting to warn the wider world about the danger posed by Putin's Russia. In a September 2022 speech, the Polish president Andrzej Duda warned the United States General Assembly that this is not just a regional conflict. Russia's war against Ukraine is a potential source of global conflagration. This war will affect our countries as well as yours if it hasn't already. This, then, is what Poland is truly afraid of. For decades during the Cold War, it nervously awaited a war between the Soviet bloc and the West, knowing its borders might once again become Europe's bloodlands. Today, the threat remains. Eastern Europe is experiencing its worst conflict since World War II, and from the start, global leaders have warned against any actions that could escalate into a potential World War III scenario. Last November, this was
It's crazy how many different weapons there are.
almost what happened. That month, an errant missile crossed over into Polish territory, detonating at an agricultural grain weighing facility, killing 2 people. The event, the war's first strike on territory outside Ukraine, prompted a barrage of coverage. Who fired the missile? From where? Why? Everyone knew NATO's famous Article 5 defense clause in the alliance's founding charter meant an attack on one ally was an attack on them all. Prudently, as the world leaders waited for answers, world leaders, none more patient than Poland, collected and weighed the evidence, ultimately deciding the event was likely a misfire, and ultimately not enough to invoke Article 5. It may not have sparked World War III, but the strike did prompt Polish officials to redouble their efforts to prepare for such an eventuality.
So this event lead to even more like upscaling of the military?
Several months before, an opinion poll found that 84% of Poles expressed fears that military action could spill over into Polish territory. Poland, much like Ukraine, knows it could never face Russia alone without the material and moral support from the West. Could it? It would be
Poland is probably stronger than Ukraine, right? Is it?
impossible to predict how a conflict between Poland
And also the border is much smaller, so it's easier to defend, probably.
and Russia might unfold, nor how much support Poland might receive from NATO and the West. One thing's for sure, Poland isn't waiting around to find out. In the meantime, it's doing its utmost to deter Russia by arming and equipping its armed forces in a way that gives them the highest probability of military success. Is it overreacting? We really don't think so. In many respects, Poland now sees Ukraine fulfilling the role it was once destined to fill, the linchpin of European security, the first wall of defense against a Russian bear railing in its unrelenting quest to fulfill its imperialist ambitions. Poland has claimed it will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. The nation's historic antipathy to all things Russian and Russia's blatant disregard for its neighbors' sovereignty has prompted a thorough rededication to its own defense through an impressive military buildup. Poland already arguably possesses Europe's best army, but after the November 2022 missile incident, it looks set to get even stronger. And it means business. Since the start of Russia's invasion, Poland claims it has experienced its highest wave of recruitment since it officially ended conscription back in 2008.
Okay, interesting. So even the people want not only that the military is rising up, but they do something themselves. That's interesting. In Germany, it's more like, yeah, we should stack up our military, but we don't do anything. No, the soldiers should do.
It recruited more than 13,500 professional soldiers, about 8% of Poland's total armed forces of 164,000. With the recent announcement to astronomically increase its military spending from 2.5 to 4, possibly even 5% of its GDP.
By the way, what I really don't get is this whole marching thing. Why do I have to be a soldier? Why do I have to march in a straight line, all have the same leg movement and stuff like that? That doesn't help me at all on the battlefield, right?
It aims to increase its overall force structure to 300,000 professional soldiers. This will not only dwarf Germany's 1.5% of GDP spent on defense, it will see Poland...
I mean, it was before... Was it before the 100 billion? I don't know.
...almost double its army of 170,000. It is the type of commitment that shows Poland has already become, in the words of a senior US Army official in Europe, our most important partner in continental Europe. Wait, it gets better. The Polish military renaissance means an even tighter defense alliance with the United States, one of its main weapon suppliers. In 2020, the Polish government reached agreements to purchase HIMARS rocket launchers, F-35...
I mean, Poland does exactly the thing that America always wants, that NATO countries spend more on their defense, right? So,
combat aircraft, Patriot air defense systems, MRAPs, and hundreds of M1 Abrams tanks to replace its stockpile of the 240 Soviet tanks it sent to Ukraine. It has announced its intention to eventually incorporate American.
Do countries give this to you, Ukraine, or do they loan them and then have to pay something back? Or is it just a gift for Ukraine?
Black Hawk helicopters made in Poland by Lockheed Martin, other multi-role aircraft, and drones to complement its arsenal of American F-16s already in use among its air forces. This is not all. Poland is also ordering billions of dollars worth of weapons from cheaper South Korean weapons manufacturers, with a $10 to $12 billion order for 180 K2 Black Panther tanks, 200 K9 Thunder howitzers, 48 Fa-50 light attack aircraft, and 218 K2-39 Chunmoo rocket launchers. And that's only the used gear. Poland's appetite for new arms is even bigger, claimed one journalist. Korea will eventually send Poland 1,000 K2 tanks and 600 K9 howitzers in the coming years. It has also purchased Italian Leonardo.
Maybe it would be a good strategy to make weapons your own, because then you keep the money in the country, right?
Helicopters.
I know that's probably very difficult, but just as a thought.
Built in Poland. Talk about being prepared for anything. What could go wrong? Well, some do say Poland's unprecedented defense spending will strain its domestic budget to the breaking point, but its neighbors are hardly complaining. They know the more Poland spends, the safer they'll be. Poland is acting on its stated desire to become Central Europe's preeminent military power. Many doubt whether their vision will ever come to fruition. Polish military stocks are still heavily based on Soviet-era surplus after all, but the recent influx of American weapons like the M1A2 Abrams into the country, its diversification to the other foreign weapon markets, and its emphasis on recruiting and training a new generation of dedicated soldiers certainly paint a promising picture.
Thank you, Poland, for this great job. I think you help all of us, even the more lazy countries in this regard. Hi.
Might. And in the eventuality that Russian aggression spills beyond Ukraine's borders, Europe can be assured that if any country will be ready to fight, Poland will be chief among them. But what do you think? Will Poland eventually find itself in an epic battle with Putin's army?
No, I don't think Putin is that dumb to attack NATO and Poland. That would be so dumb. I mean, that would be the Third World War, and that is why I can't believe that in my regard. But yeah, Poland thinks differently. And I'm very glad, because then also, of course, Germans are more secured, and you do a very great job. Thank you for that. Keep giving me more recommendations what I should react to next. And yeah, keep liking and subscribing, and we see each other in the next video. Bye.